Thanks everyone for being here with me today. I'm looking forward to having a good chat with you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll see if it likes me. There we go. So I'm going to be talking about navigating a cybersecurity career today. And as I go through this talk, some things for you to think about while I'm yappering on. One is, where are you in your career? And maybe some of these questions will be helpful for you personally. But think about the people who are on your team, the people that you mentor, the people that you know are interested in being in cybersecurity that may have some questions. And think about whether you would answer these questions the same way that I have. So with that in mind, let's get started. So just some quick background. I have been doing the cybersecurity thing for a number of years. I was at JP Chase for a super long time. I was the CISO of Ohio State University for almost 8 years, which is more than 3 times the average CISO tenure. And I don't know if that is because I'm stupid. I don't know if that's because higher ed is a really challenging place to do security, or whether that was just serendipity, but I was there a really long time. And now I'm an advisory CISO at Cisco. And throughout this career, I've been doing a lot of mentoring with a whole bunch of people. And those people could be students in college, certainly. That happened a lot when I was at Ohio State. It could be people who are already working in security and were struggling with a problem. It could be somebody who was taking on a security team as a leader for the first time. And what I found was that they'd reach out to me on social media, or they'd find a way to contact me and they'd say, Helen, come have coffee with me. And I go, okay. And I ended up having so much coffee that I was having caffeine jitters all the time. And so one of the reasons that I wanted to give you this talk today is because I decided, in order to be able to do this really well, I needed to write a book. And writing a book that answered these questions would allow me to, 1, have less coffee, 2, share these questions with more people more broadly, and 3, be a resource for people who are not only asking questions, but the people who are trying to answer questions as well. So if you find yourself in a mentoring position, feel free to check this out. On the other hand, don't feel like you have to buy it at all, because I won't know if you do or not. In the book, there are some themes that seem to run through every question that was answered and every phase of a cybersecurity career that I talked about. So the book is split into 3 phases. How do you get into security? How do you survive and thrive in security if you're a single contributor? And how do you lead security if you're going to lead a security team or a security program? Throughout all of those, regardless of the stage of the cybersecurity degree, there were these sort of 4 themes of things that you needed to do or things you needed to know in order to be successful. So I'm going to start talking about how to be successful in cybersecurity by talking about these 4 things, and then we'll jump into some other things after that. So the first thing I think any of us need to know is why we're in this program to even start with. When I have people come to me and say they want to work in security, often they put it that way. Hey, Helen, I want to work in security. And I'll say, well, what kind of security? And they'll go, oh, well, what kind of security is there? And I send them away to go do some research. But we all know the security field is really, really big, and it's growing more and more. I'm sure there's going to be a career path for cybersecurity in Bitcoin before we know it. And so if you're trying to decide what kind of security to be in, or whether or not you should stay in the parts of security you were in now, having some self-awareness around why you like what you do, why you think security could be a good thing for you, is really important. But it's not just a matter of going away and saying, why do I like security? You've got to go a little bit deeper than that. So one of the things I think we all should be doing on a pretty regular basis is thinking about what we ourselves value, thinking about where we have priorities, what are the things we really care about, what gets us out of bed in the morning, what allows us to sleep well at night, how do we communicate, and really what our work style is, because that's going to tell us not only what kind of security should we be doing, but also what kind of organization or company or environment should we be doing it in. So for example, one of the things I've found is there's actually some sort of communities of people in cybersecurity that are common. There's a lot of people in security who are ex-military or have worked in the Peace Corps, or who otherwise have some kind of community service focus to what they do. They really see themselves as a defender, not just in terms of blue team, but they see themselves as the reason they're in security is because they want to help companies and organizations defend themselves against cyber attacks. And they see it as sort of that defender, almost a warrior kind of role. That is a value. And that can be applied as you think about where you want to work. People like that are often in blue teams or incident response teams, for example. They're probably less inclined, not always, but they're often less inclined to perhaps maybe go and do ethical hacking. Maybe not. So understanding those values, you know, what's really important to you is really important to be able to answer the, and where do I fit in cybersecurity? For me, I really value predictability, believe it or not. I like changing things, don't get me wrong, but on a day-to-day tasking level, I like knowing where I'm going to park. I like knowing when I'm going to walk, when I'm going to do a certain task. I like knowing who I'm going to meet with during the day. And one of the reasons I got into security was I was originally in just IT, doing server administration and networking administration. And in the late 90s, all these worms came along and they kept blowing out my planned day. The I love you virus came through and my whole week was blown. The slammer worm came through, my whole week was blown. And I started getting sick of it. So for me, I do security so I can help organizations be resilient, but also predictable, because that's a value that I really care about. So thinking about starting with why, to borrow Simon Sinek's book title, is really important, I think, in terms of knowing where to start in security. But also, if you feel like you're burning out in your role or your company, thinking about what you need is also a very important skill and a very important thing to do, having that reflection time to understand that. When I worked in a Wall Street bank, when I worked at JP Morgan, I learned a lot. It was a really valuable learning experience, and I really enjoyed the people I worked with. But the culture of JP Morgan didn't actually align really well to my personal values. And so I found it not impossible, but it was challenging to come into the office every day when I felt like I had to sort of flex my personality to be there a little bit. Working in higher education and now at Cisco, the culture is a little bit different, and I feel like I don't have to flex quite so much. So my communication style seems to be better where I am. My work style is more appreciated where I am. Some of that's the timing of it. I'm sure JP Morgan is a different company now than it was when I was there. But these are some of the things that I had to evaluate for myself. And so for people who are already in security but are wondering, I'm burning out, but I don't know if it's the work I'm doing, is it the job, the tasking, or is it the place that I'm doing it? That kind of understanding is really important too. So we start with why, and we start with self-awareness. The second thing that you need to do to have a really good security career, one that is fulfilling, I think, is to network. Now, I say this as somebody who's sort of tends to be a little extroverted to start with. But even if you're an introverted person, even if you're very happy working remotely from home, even if the worst thing that you can think about is actually showing up in person and having to be around people for very long, there is still a role for networking to play. The value of networking is to surround yourselves with people where possible who understand you as an individual, who understand what you're trying to do in security, who understand what it's like to work in security, but to also give you a view of what you're doing in a place where you can reflect on what you're doing that isn't the place where you work. Now, you can network within a company if your company is big enough, but I would recommend that you have a network of people in the company as well as outside the company. That network can provide support. It can provide a place where you can go and validate whether or not the things you're experiencing, the way you're interpreting those things are appropriate or not. You can also use the network For training, if you're a member of ISSA, you come to conferences like this, you are a member of ISC Squared. There's a lot of training that's happening out there that you can take advantage of on the cheap, on the job, and the network can help you know where are those training opportunities, where are the valuable training opportunities. Can be super helpful. And of course, career planning. The broader your network, the more likely you are to find people who are doing things you might like to do, who are people you can ask questions of. That career planning phase is really important from a network perspective as well. So here's a book, Tribe of Hackers, written by Marcus Carey and Jennifer Jin, that interviewed a whole bunch of people from around the globe that talked about their experience while they're working in security, while they're leading security. Getting hold of books like this is a way of networking if you don't actually want to talk to people directly. So again, think about how do you build a network of people who can help you where you are, but also help you where you want to be. Can be a great place to think about. Third thing, regardless of whether you're starting, whether you're in the middle, whether you're leading an organization, staying curious is a really important thing to do. One of the things that I get asked a lot is, how do I stay current? Because the environment's changing so fast. And one of the ways to stay current is to stay curious. What do I mean by that? Be active in looking for information that's coming out about the security industry, about the history of security, because we certainly seem to keep repeating the same problems over and over again, to understand where the emerging trends are happening, what's going to be coming down the road 6 months from now or 12 months from now. So understanding where technology is headed is a piece of it. Understanding where the security industry as a whole is going is a part of it. Understanding where society is going in its use of technology and its use of information is a part of it. And like I said, understanding history is really important. This book here, The Cuckoo's Egg, has been a story about something that happened almost 30 years ago, if not longer. And it's a story that is actually a recounting of a real life cybersecurity incident that happened ages ago. And when you read it, even though it happened ages ago, you realize the stuff that we're dealing with this week looks just like this stuff. So a lot of what we're seeing in security today isn't new. So be a student of history, of cybersecurity history, and know the history, because you will start to recognize patterns that come along. And that's going to help you as a new person, a mid-career person, and particularly as a security leader. You're going to be able to predict the future if you know what's happened in the past. So give some thought to, how do you structure your day, your week, your month to make time to be curious? Do you block off time on your calendar so that you can just experiment with some new technology? Do you walk the dog and listen to a security podcast at the same time? Do you listen to a book on Audible while you're washing the dishes? Do you schedule time on the weekends just to sit down with a book? I've got a link here to the Cyber Canon, which is a place where there's a whole bunch of cybersecurity books that have been reviewed by other cybersecurity professionals, and you can read those reviews. So before you go and buy a book you know nothing about that might not be worth your time to read, you can go and take a look there and see if someone's already read it and what their review is for that book. So there's a whole bunch of resources that are out there for us to stay curious with, and we need to be able to do that. The last of the 4 topics that I wanted to highlight as being really common across all levels of a cybersecurity career path is being able to communicate really well and often. I think this is particularly a leadership trait, but the sooner in your career you can learn this, the easier your entire job and your entire career is going to be. You need to be able to talk about what's happening in security with people who aren't in security. And I don't care what kind of role you're in, this is always the case. You've got to be able to talk about security stuff with IT people, but also with your finance partners who are going to give you money, to your business partners who are just trying to get their job done while you're trying to help them do it in a secure way. You must be able to talk to people about that. You've got to be able to help people understand your role. One of the reasons that security gets tagged as being the team of no, which I promise that's the last time I'm ever going to use that term, is because other people don't understand what it is that security people are trying to do, or why the security people think that's important. So one of the things that's really important as a single contributor or as a manager is the ability to be able to go in and tell somebody, this is what I do, these are the things that are important to me, but also then ask the same questions of the other person. What's important to you? What do you think about security? What are you focused on right now? And you're going to need to be able to communicate well enough to marry your needs with their needs. And you've got to be able, as a leader, to share that really widely. So if you're the leader of a security team, or you're trying to deploy an entire program across your organization or through your customers, you've got to be able to share really broadly what you're doing, which means you've got to tag the way you talk about security and what you're trying to do at a pretty generic, super high level. And you've got to build relationships to do that. There will be misunderstandings between you and other people. It's inevitable. You need to have strong relationships with your key stakeholders so that when those misunderstandings occur, you have enough of an emotional base between you that you can overcome those misunderstandings. The book that I mentioned here is an oldie but a goodie. It's called Switch, as you can see, and it's about organizational change. It is not a cybersecurity book, but it talks about how do you get people to emotionally engage in what you want them to do so that they want to do what you want them to do. And it's not just an intellectual pursuit. Intellect is fine, but it's not going to get people to be advocates of security or to be real partners with you in what you're trying to do. You have to engage their hearts as well as their minds. So I would highly recommend this book for you to take a look at. Like I said, it's been around a super long time, but it's one that I use on a pretty regular basis. So go check that out. So if those are the four themes of what it is that sort of carries through every part of a security career, there are a few questions that I get a lot of. So I wanted to share these with you because I'm sure either you have these questions for yourself or somebody's going to ask you these questions. The first one I get a lot of is, do I need a certification or a degree? The reason I wanted to put this in here is that if you are looking to get into cybersecurity, this is an important question to have. But also, if you're hiring people to be part of your team, this is a really important question for you to think about as well. Do you require certifications or degrees in order for somebody to take a job in your team, in your security team? Sometimes we are going to require that. More often, I would argue, we don't need either certifications nor degrees. Most of the time, there are things that we can do to train on the job. So if you're a hiring manager and you're willing to train on the job, don't put this stuff in the job description as a requirement, in the job posting as a requirement. Now, you might like it as a nice to have, that's fine. But there is a cost to certifications and degrees. And the more cost you assign to your job, the fewer people are going to apply for it and the less diverse your hiring pipeline is going to be. But some things to do if you're a job seeker: certifications are quick to do in terms of studying, taking a test, but actually they take a long time to achieve because most of the certifications worth anything require 2 to 3 to 5 years of work experience in that domain before you're actually qualified to get the certification. I appreciate the work requirements that go along with this. We don't just want certifications that make people into paper tigers. On the other hand, if you've got an entry-level job and you're requiring a certification as a prerequisite for someone applying for the job, make sure that you're not asking for a certification that an entry-level person just is not capable of actually having. The good news about certifications, though, is that it can create a roadmap of self-learning for somebody to learn a certain kind of role. So you may not want to go to the expense of getting a certified ethical hacker certification, but you can look to see what kinds of domains are in that certification and what kinds of training are available to get that certification. And you can do that on your own if you want to, without necessarily actually getting the certification. And if you do self-study like that, it's worth putting on a resume for sure. And then the third thing is certifications can help somebody keep up with new stuff. So if you want to know what the latest and greatest is in certifications for ethical hacking, well, go look at certifications for ethical hacking. But it can give you a roadmap for self-learning just to keep up with the topics, even if you're not interested in getting the cert. On the other hand, we've got degrees. Right now, there are a number of universities and two-year colleges across the United States and in other countries that are offering cybersecurity degrees. This didn't exist when I was around, so this was not a path that was available to me or anyone who's as old as I am. The challenge that you have as a hiring manager is that every school has different elements contained within their degrees. There's not a standard training set within a degree program. So again, if you're a hiring manager and you require a degree, I want you to think long and hard about what the skills are in the degree that you're asking for. And then instead of asking for a degree in a job posting, ask for the skills that you expect the degree to have. Someone may come to you with those skills that they learned on the job somewhere else, rather than actually having a piece of paper around it. Now, if you find that there's value just going through any degree program and just the tenacity of getting a 4-year degree or a 2-year degree is what you're looking for, then great. Just say any 4-year degree is going to be satisfactory, and that's fine. Degrees take a long time. They are typically they're very theoretically focused and less hands-on focused. So if you value on-the-job learning, if you value practical experience, don't ask for a degree, typically. And again, do you really need someone with a 4-year degree to do an entry-level cybersecurity role? Probably not. Now, you may be looking for that for mid or senior level roles. Fine, I get it. But really give it some real clear thought about, if you're a hiring manager, about whether or not any of these things are really required as an entry level to a job. You may offer to train somebody or pay for someone to get a degree while they're working for you. That's fine. Just don't put it into the job posting. The second question that comes up a lot is, should I be a single contributor or should I be a manager? And I see a lot of people who are really excellent single contributors thinking that their only way up the career ladder is to manage a team. And I think particularly in cybersecurity, we've got to get over ourselves. Management and managing skills is completely separate than being a technologist. It's a different skill set. It requires a different kind of person to be a manager. It is not for everybody. So we do need to, as an industry, build better career ladders for people who are single contributors or technologists, separate from somebody who is going to manage a team. So when someone comes to me and says, should I take this management role or should I continue being a single contributor and maybe go a little bit deeper on technology, I really ask them to think about whether they enjoy managing people, whether they think they'd enjoy managing people, why they're asking whether or not they should become a manager in the first place. Being a manager, particularly a first-line manager, I think is one of the most difficult jobs in an organization, because you're stuck between senior leaders who are telling you what to do and staff who are looking to you for answers as to why things have to be the way they are. You don't have the authority to really change the way things are that much, but you're answerable to it. So that first-line management role is a really difficult role. So if you're going to become a manager, you've got to really like people, and you've got to spend some time learning how to manage people, learning how to deal with difficult conversations, learning how to have really good emotional intelligence before you step up into the management role. So things to think about from being a single contributor to being a manager. Not everyone has to be a manager. And in fact, throughout a security career, people can often go from managing teams to going back to being a single contributor, moving over again into being a manager, moving up to a senior single contributor role. So whether or not you manage staff should not be an indicator of career progression, but it often is, and I recognize that as well. So really hard to think about it for yourself. Some people really love, like me, I love managing a team, but right now I'm in a single contributor role, and that's fine too. And for right now, I'm really enjoying not having to manage a whole bunch of really stressed out, COVID depleted staff. I got enough going on my own plate. So pros and cons to both of these roles, but it is a very common question people are asking themselves. But again, if you're a mentor, you're going to be asked this question. So think about how you would answer it. So speaking about security and burnout, I do think that there are things that contribute to stress in the cybersecurity profession that are unique because of the kind of work we do. The things on the right-hand side here, I'll let you read for yourself. What I want to talk about now is the things that I think cause stress in security. I think the first thing is people outside of security don't understand security, and that adds layers of complexity to every task that we try and do. So, you know, people know what an accountant does. People know what a lawyer does. We can't necessarily appreciate how difficult that job is or what they necessarily do on a day-to-day basis, but people generally get it. They understand what a doctor or a nurse does, but people just don't understand security yet. The industry is still too young. It is misunderstood. You know, even the whole Twitter conversation about, is hacker a good term? Is hacker a bad term? Can you be a professional hacker? Should they really be called researchers? I mean, we've got our own branding problem, right? But it does mean that people outside of security have no clue what it is we do, why we do it, or how. So again, back to make sure that you can articulate what it is you do and why you do it so people can understand that. It will help actually reduce your stress of having to explain it over and over again to people who don't understand it. I think the second thing that adds stress is that as security people, we are paid to look for things that might go wrong and try and convince people to take steps to address that and protect against it before that thing happens. In the previous panel, you know, we talked about 9/11 and people not even imagining that we might be in a situation where planes fly into the side of the building, for example. In security, we're paid to think about those kinds of things. But other people don't want to think about those things. They don't want to think about the bad things that are happening. When we even raise the prospect that something might not be great, we get accused of being negative in our thoughts or not on board with the team. And we see things coming, and we know that in order to prepare for that thing coming, we've got to start now. Whereas the motivations of a lot of non-security people are something else, and they would rather defer the work of security to a later time. So we've got a time factor that causes us stress because we can see the train coming down the track and we can see that our people aren't clearing off the track in time, and that can be a little stressful. So that's a problem of working in security as well. And then, of course, we have not yet convinced the business that they have to pay attention to security because it's helpful to them. So security is seen as a cost center. It's seen as something that they have to hold their nose and do, but not something that's really great or great fun or a business differentiator. Unless, of course, you work for a security company, and then, yes, you are a business differentiator. But security isn't often, for most of us, seen as a frontline revenue building function. And so we are continuously trying to fight for resources to get the things that we need. And that causes security stress. So with all of that on there, it's like, well, why would anyone want to work in security at all? Well, some people don't. They come into security, they try it for a while, and they leave. But there are ways of being able to take care of yourself. And I list them here. It is about sleep, diet, and exercise for sure. But it can be things like teaching other people about security so that they do understand security a little bit better and you can minimize your misunderstandings. And it is, even though we are paid to think about the things that could go wrong and prepare against it, we can talk in a positive way about how good it is to be able to identify those things and be prepared and all of those kinds of things. There is a positive spin to put on the work of looking for bad things happening. And we can do that, and it will help us manage our own security stress. So when you talk to people about security, we in security have a tendency to want to lead with data and lead with numbers. How many things have we patched? How many bad things could go wrong? How many applications do we have? How many of those are in the cloud? How many incidents have we had? How many dollars have been lost to ransomware in the last 12 months? All of those things. This is not going to help us move an organization to forward into becoming a security aware culture and a security engaged culture. So I do really stress that we need to learn how to tell stories. We need to be able to lead with imagery that evokes an emotional reaction that we want, not a fear and doubt emotional reaction, but an emotional reaction that gets finance officers to give us more money, that gets board members to feel confident that we've got ourselves managed well and that they can trust that we're doing what needs to be done. We need to control our narrative around storytelling so that we can make sure that we are in charge of what's being said and not somebody else. There is a lot of internal organizational chatter that happens around security stuff that is often misinformed. I will not call it misinformation, but it's misinformed, and it doesn't tell the story overall that we need to tell. And the story we need to tell as security professionals is a long game story. It's not about what did we fix today. It's about how did we help the business move forward with their revenue targets and so forth tomorrow. It's not about defending against hackers. It's about protecting our revenue streams. It's those kinds of things that will allow us, again, to be seen as a positive contributor to the bottom line, not just a negative taker and a fear and doubt kind of group. So storytelling and learning to tell a story is a really important skill for anybody in the security profession to have. And then the last thing I ponder in these questions that people had is, how do you know when it's time to leave a role? But what do you want to leave behind when you do leave that role? What's the legacy that you want to leave for that position? And this isn't about someone who's retiring, although it could be. It's when do you know that the work you've done in a particular position is finished? What do you want the teams to take away from the work that you've done with them? And I would suggest that there's a couple of things to think about, particularly if you're a leader, there's a couple of things to think about. What do you want your immediate team and organization to keep with them after you've gone? And do you want to have an impact at that company level, or do you want to have an impact in the security profession more broadly? A lot of the speakers that you've seen today are speaking in a conference like this because they want to leave an impact on the broader security community, not just their immediate job. So how do you think about what you want your legacy to be? For some, it's, I want to just know, I want my company to know that I did everything I could to keep them secure, and that is what they want their legacy to be. Others, like me, they may want to write a book, they may want to do more public speaking, they may want to serve on boards, they may want to volunteer and use their cybersecurity skills in a non-profit kind of organization. Again, what do you value? Going back to one of those primary questions, what do you value? And what does that mean in terms of leaving the role? If you have that in your brain, then the question of when is it time to leave my job and go do another job, you can ask yourself, have I left the legacy that I want to leave before I move on to a new role? And it's something worth thinking about. And in this really fast-paced profession where people are jumping from job to job to job really quickly, I don't think we think about this often enough. So I encourage you to give a thought to what you want your legacy to be as well. So with all that, some things to think about for your cybersecurity career, for the people who come and ask you how they can get into security or how they can continue to think about security. And I hope you've enjoyed the session. So thank you very much, everybody.